let's go to the orange and white and your first impressions of what you saw on Saturday.
So, Mark, I think the top storyline out of Saturday was the injuries. Tennessee had about 24 players that didn't play, a lot of big names. So you can't really tell what the team's going to look like. But it was a great day in Knoxville to get a glimpse of the team. Here's my thing. My observations from a spring game. You have to really be measured in what you take away from a spring game. The game plans are going to, if they scrimmage at all, some teams just do drills. If they scrimmage, the play calling's going to be very bland, a lot of no contact for a lot of players. So when I look at a spring game, I'm focusing on the individual performances and how key players have gotten better. Mark, the three areas I looked at on Saturday were offensive line's performance one-on-one against the defensive line, the defensive communication, and the consistency in the passing game. For the offensive line, I took the offensive line's performance away as the single best positive that came out of Saturday's orange and white game. For the last 2 years, the offensive line has been kind of hanging on by a thread, a lot of heart and a lot of technique, but they haven't had the depth nor the talent that Tennessee needed to compete for the SEC East Championship. The offensive line looked really good in their one-on-one drills and the scrimmage against a highly touted defensive line. In particular, highly touted recruit Drew Richmond looked good at left tackle. Defensive communication last year, many of the fourth quarter collapses last year were due to defensive miscommunication, particularly on the back end, especially that Florida game. You did not see Shoops scheme on Saturday in Knoxville, but what you did see, particularly in the second half, was the defense really communicating well and being on the same page. That will help that defense close the gap with the rest of the SEC competition. Lastly, the most frustrating thing, as it has been for the last 2 years, was consistency in the passing game, particularly that second, third level. Josh Dobbs had a couple errant throws. He also had a couple drops by the receivers. Having said that, there were only 3 scholarship receivers available for practice on Saturday, so that may have had some impact in the passing game. But again, Vol fans have seen this inconsistency between a very good quarterback and some very highly touted wide receivers for the last 2 years, and it's still frustrating Vol fans. So that's kind of what I took away from Saturday, and would love to field some questions.
Mike, you just hit on it. The wide receivers being injured, you only had 3 there. But did that really help, unearth maybe Preston Williams and Jeff George, or was that something we were probably going to see anyway? Does what they did in the spring game change the outlook and the depth chart at wide receiver? Because those guys, they were making plays that day, catching balls in the red zone and the end zone area. So there were some really impressive plays those 2 guys were making.
Yeah, you're right. Both Preston Williams and Jeff George looked great on Saturday, particularly in some of the one-on-one drills and in the red zone. That's really where they looked best. It helped Jeff George much more than it helped Preston Williams. Preston Williams has a year in the program. He's kind of a known commodity. He's come a long way in the last year, but he was much more of a known commodity. As far as affecting the depth chart, not so much with Preston Williams. You were going to see Preston Williams on the field this year quite a bit. For Jeff George, allowing him to demonstrate in a much more highly competitive environment than in practice, demonstrating what he's capable of and what he can do to the coaches, it probably helped him. It definitely helped him more than Preston Williams, and it may have helped him break in to the rotation early in the season.
And one more, and I'll jump to the other side of the ball. You mentioned we didn't get to see a lot of scheme from what Bob Shoops was going to do on defense, but throughout the spring, you hear some insider reports and stuff, and you're well connected there for the program. Are there going to be any big wholesale changes that we might see? That we definitely didn't see in the game, or is he going to still keep most of what they did and just try and refine what Tennessee has been known for the last couple of years?
Well, the biggest thing you're going to see is he's going to have much more. He's going to utilize a lot more pressure. As far as the way it looks on the field to the average fan, you're not going to see much different as far as alignment and scheme. But what you're going to see is much more pressure. He's going to rely on that athleticism from the defensive backs. The one schematic you will see is his base defense is basically 5 defensive backs, which is a little bit different from where it's been in the past in Knoxville. But he's going to rely. He has that extra defensive back because he puts a lot of pressure on his secondary because he uses pressure up front a lot with blitzes. So that's what you're going to see. And so that pressure is going to result on a lot of situations in the secondary where they're going to have to cover down on the defensive line and the linebackers scheming. So it's going to look a little bit different, a lot more pressure. but schematically to the average fan, the scheme and alignment is gonna look much more like we've run our nickel package in the past.
Hey, Mike, the goal of any program, I would think, between the end of spring practice and getting to that first week of August is basically keep everybody out of trouble and keep them healthy. Besides that, what are you going to want to see out of the gate that first couple sessions in August to get this football team prepared to win a division championship?
Well, I mean, other than healthy and staying out of trouble, those are the two big ones. Easily the most important thing on the field that they have to fix is consistency in the passing game. I talked about it a little bit previously. Josh Dobbs has the ability to throw. He was at about 59% completion rate last year, which is decent. He really needs, I think he needs to be between 64 and 68% for Tennessee to take that next step, competing for the SEC East Championship. But what's kind of deceiving that is the majority of his completions last year were that short 5 yards or less range. Both Jalen Hurd and Alvin Kamara, I think the two of them were in the top 3 or top 4 receivers based on number of receptions last year. So when your two running backs are 2 of your 4 top receivers, that shows you that your passing game is much more in the flats and 5 yards and in, what we would call first-level passes. Where they really need help is getting more consistent in the second, third level. Tight ends over the middle, 10 to 15-yard in routes, and then the deep routes or the deep out routes. Dobbs has the capability to do that. So some of it's on Dobbs and his mechanics and his consistency, but some of it's on the receivers. The receivers have not shown an ability over the last 2 years to get a lot of separation, and they've had several critical drops. So that's the single biggest thing that people are going to be looking for, consistency in the passing game, particularly second, third level throws.
All right, after 9 wins and 4 losses in 2015, of course, Butch Jones trying to parlay those top 5 recruiting classes into something special here in 2016 and avoid that string of excruciating losses, probably to top-level competition, unlike anything we saw out of any team in the country last season for the Vols when you talk that Florida collapse in Gainesville, Alabama on the ropes with the lead with 4 minutes left. On down the line, the Arkansas game, of course, the 14-point lead at home against a team that went to the college football playoff in Oklahoma as well. All right, this is SEC Breakdown. We come your way every Wednesday night, 9 o'clock Eastern Time and 8 o'clock Central.